Hi there, and welcome to this video on GCSE Biology for the AQA Specification, focusing on transport in cells and in particular active transport. I'm Shumina from StudyMind, where we help you revise GCSE Biology with our helpful video tutorials, tailored to your subject, your specification, and to you. If you're new here, make sure you click the subscribe button. Whilst you are watching, please leave any comments below if you're unsure about anything, and let us know if it's your first time watching our videos so we can send you our free revision materials. We also have helpful timestamps below for each part of the video to help guide you through the specification. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to this tutorial on active transport. So in the previous two tutorials in this series, we had a look at different types of transport in cells, including diffusion and osmosis. And now we're moving on to look at the third main type of transport in cells, so active transport. So similar to the last tutorials, we're going to have a look at the basic definition of active transport and also have a look at some examples in both plants and in the human body. And these are your specification points, so do read them through carefully. So first of all, active transport is the movement of substances against a concentration gradient using energy provided by respiration. So I want you to remember some key points here that you've got to include if you are asked to define active transport. So against a concentration gradient is really important, and you've got to remember that it uses energy. So this distinguishes it from osmosis and diffusion because both of them go down a concentration gradient, whereas active transport is going against it. So you can see here how diffusion and osmosis are going down the concentration gradient. Active transport is moving substances from low concentration to high concentration. Therefore, it's against the downhill, so it's against a concentration gradient. And because we're moving substances against a concentration gradient, we have to use energy for this. Whereas diffusion and osmosis are passive, they don't require energy. And where do we get this energy from? Well, it will be from ATP from respiration. So, let's have a look at some examples. So, active transport in plants. So a really good example of this is in root hair cells. So we know that plants require mineral ions for growth, and in particular nitrates in the soil are especially needed for protein synthesis. So these nitrates have to be taken up from the soil by these root hair cells. Now this is going to involve one form of transport. Now is it osmosis, is it diffusion, is it active transport? Well, taking a look at the concentrations, so mineral ions are in a higher concentration inside the root hair cells compared to in the soil. So if there's a higher concentration in the actual root hair cell compared to the surrounding soil, that means we're essentially moving substances from a high to a low, from a low concentration outside the root hair cell to a higher concentration in the root hair cell. So therefore, because we're going from low to high, that's against a concentration gradient, so it's going to be active transport. So this is going to require energy. So as you can see here, there's a higher concentration of nitrates in roots compared to the lower concentration in soil, moving against, therefore it's active transport. So this occurs in root hair cells. But it also occurs in the gut, in the body. So active transport helps sugar to be transferred from a low concentration in the gut to a higher concentration in the blood. So in the blood we have a higher concentration of glucose, in the gut there's a lower concentration. Again, we're moving against our concentration gradient, okay? Because we are going from low to high concentration, that's against a concentration gradient. And so this is active transport, and this allows the glucose from the gut to be absorbed. So it's going to require ATP, which provides the energy. But just keep in mind that if we didn't have this as a mechanism of transport, then we wouldn't be able to absorb glucose from the gut into the blood. And instead, glucose from the blood would move out into the gut from high to low concentration. So it's good that we have active transport because it means we're able to absorb as much glucose as possible into the blood. And this glucose will eventually be used for respiration in your working cells. So, as I've said many times in this tutorial and also in previous tutorials, active transport requires energy. How do we make energy in the body? Well, we make it in the form of ATP via respiration. So, if in a question in an exam you get asked why perhaps an epithelial cell has many mitochondria compared to other cells, just think, what are mitochondria used for? Well, mitochondria are the site of respiration, right? So they're going to be a site at which lots of ATP is produced. So therefore, as active transport requires ATP, cells that use active transport are going to require many mitochondria. So you can therefore infer from that that a cell with lots of mitochondria is perhaps responsible for allowing active transport to occur in the body. So an epithelial cell, for example, there's going to be lots of active transport occurring through that. So we're going to need lots of mitochondria to provide the ATP that we need for the movement of substances against their concentration gradient in active transport. So just to summarise all of this for you, so I've tried to compare, as I've gone through these last tutorials, I've tried to compare between the three different types of transport, but here it is, just summarised for you. So active transport is an active process, and it's handy because it's in the actual name of the transport mechanism, so that means that you won't forget that. And because it's an active process, well, because it's moving substances from a low to a high concentration gradient, it's an active process. Okay? And I'm going to add another little column or row here. So looking at the concentration gradient, in active transport we are going against the concentration gradient, aren't we? Which is why we're requiring this energy. That's why it's an active process, because we're moving substances from low to high concentration. In simple diffusion, it's going to be a passive process because it's moving it down a concentration gradient, so I'll just write down the concentration gradient there. And in osmosis, oh sorry, my other writing disappeared when I flipped the slide, but that's also going to be down the concentration gradient, so down against the concentration gradient, okay? So just note the differences. It's really important for you to be able to recite this table off by heart. You should know that diffusion and osmosis are passive processes. You should know that this therefore means that they are moving substances from high to low concentration gradient down a concentration gradient. And the opposite is true for active transport. And do you see how if you know any one of these, you can actually figure out the others? So let's say I were to tell you that we're moving a substance from high to low concentration gradient. You then know it's a passive transport, and you also know that it's moving down a concentration gradient. So you can work these things out if you simply just remember one of these rows for each of these different types of transport. Okay? So yes, as I said, so do remember those differences because it might be asked in your exam. So now let's have a look at some practice questions. So I want you to pause the video at this point, have a look through this question, select which statements are true, so more than one could be true, and then we'll go over it now in a few seconds. Okay, so if you pause the video and had a go at this, well done, we'll just go through it now. So first of all, looking at the statement, so active transport requires many mitochondria. Yes, we know this is true because active transport requires energy because we're moving substances against their concentration gradient from low to a high concentration gradient. Therefore, that's from a low to a high concentration, which is therefore against their concentration gradient. Therefore, we require the energy, which is provided by respiration. Where does respiration occur? It occurs in the mitochondria. So active transport requires many mitochondria. That's a really good one for you to remember because examiners love putting that into exams. They love saying, asking you questions like, why do you think this epithelial cell has many mitochondria? And if you remember this statement, you'll know that it could mean that a lot of active transport is occurring in this cell. So only active transport is not passive.
Yes, if you think back to the table on the previous slides, yes, we know that only diffusion and osmosis are passive. Active transport is not passive, it's an active process, as it says in its name. Diffusion and osmosis go from a low to a high concentration? Absolutely not. We know it's high to low, down to concentration gradient, therefore passive, therefore does not require energy. And active transport uses fructose as a source of energy. False, active transport uses ATP from respiration. And where's this ATP from? It's from glucose, which is used in respiration, isn't it? So it's using glucose as a source of energy. So can you see here that if you remember just 3 facts about each of these transport processes, it simplifies everything and it means you'll get every answer right. So if you remember that diffusion and osmosis are passive, down to concentration gradient from high to low, and also just remember that with osmosis it's over a partially permeable membrane, whereas with active transport it's an active process, it's against a concentration gradient from low to high concentration and therefore requires energy in the form of ATP, which we get from respiration, which occurs in the mitochondria. So that is literally these 3 previous tutorials all summarised into about 1 minute of me talking. So that's all you need to get from these tutorials. So well done for today. I really hope that I've simplified that for you. Go back through the tutorial, have a look at the trickier parts, and well done, and I'll see you for the next session.
Thanks for watching this free video from StudyMind. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe to catch our newest videos by clicking below, and leave a comment on a topic you'd like a video on. Click here to watch more videos in our series for GCSE Biology, or visit our website studymind.co.uk for free past paper compilations by topic and specification.